John Adams, Timeless Lessons for the Modern World. Among the founding fathers of the United States, John Adams may be the most human, the most contradictory, and paradoxically, the most relevant today. Short, stocky, with an explosive temperament and sharp tongue, Adams did not possess the magnetic charisma of Washington nor the poetic eloquence of Jefferson. But he had something perhaps more valuable, a brutal honesty with himself and the world around him. Born in 1735 to a farming family in Massachusetts, Adams could have lived a simple, anonymous life. But he chose the harder path, that of inconvenient truth. He defended British soldiers in the Boston Massacre, standing up for those everyone hated because he believed in justice above popularity. He was a diplomat in Europe when he could have remained safe at home. He became president knowing he would be unpopular. As the second American president, a brilliant diplomat, and a visionary political thinker, Adams left us not only a nation but a legacy of practical wisdom that powerfully resonates today. His words, written over 2 centuries ago in intimate letters, personal diaries, and official documents, seem specifically crafted for the moral, political, and personal challenges we face today. In an age where superficiality dominates social media and simple solutions are offered for complex problems, Adams invites us to dive deep into the fundamental questions of human existence. He does not provide easy answers but tools to find our own answers with integrity. First lesson: education as a foundation. I must study politics and war that my children may have the liberty to study mathematics and philosophy, Adams wrote in a touching letter to his wife Abigail in 1780 while serving as a diplomat in Europe. Far from home, sacrificing family comfort for the sake of nation-building, Adams articulated one of the most profound insights about the generational purpose of education. This statement is not merely poetry, it is a declaration of war against ignorance. Adams understood that political freedom is useless without intellectual freedom. He himself was a voracious reader. His diaries reveal a man who devoured everything from treatises on political philosophy to works on agriculture, from theology to military strategy. He believed that an uninformed citizen is an unarmed citizen in the face of tyranny. Today, we live simultaneously in the age of information and misinformation. We have access to more knowledge than Adams ever dreamed, but we are also bombarded by more noise, more propaganda, and more deliberate lies. Adams teaches us that education is not a decorative luxury but an urgent democratic necessity, a matter of civic survival. In a world where algorithms filter our reality, creating confirmation bubbles that reinforce our prejudices, where post-truth threatens the very concept of objective fact, Adams' lesson takes on an almost dramatic urgency. He would tell us, voluntary ignorance is treason to democracy. But Adams went beyond merely accumulating information. He advocated for education as character formation. Virtue is not hereditary, he wrote. Each generation must earn it anew through study, reflection, and practice. For Adams, education was the process of transforming information into wisdom and knowledge into civic virtue. Contemporary practical application. Dedicate at least 45 minutes daily to substantive reading, not just fragmented news but texts that challenge your intellect. Practice adversarial reading. Deliberately seek authors who disagree with your beliefs. Develop the habit of checking primary sources before forming opinions. Teach something you learned to another person. Adams knew that teaching is the best way to learn. Maintain a reflection journal, as Adams did, to process and integrate the knowledge acquired. As Adams would say, ignorance is the greatest enemy of liberty, and education its most vigilant guardian. Second lesson: the balance of powers in personal life. John Adams did not invent the separation of powers, but he was its most meticulous architect in America. He spent hours studying the fall of ancient republics, Rome, Athens, Venice, seeking to understand why entire civilizations succumbed to corruption and despotism. His conclusion was strikingly simple: power concentrated inevitably corrupts. Power must be opposed to power, he wrote in his political masterpiece, A Defense of the Constitutions of Government of the United States of America. But Adams, a man of deep introspection, understood that this principle transcends government architecture. It applies to the architecture of the human soul. In his intimate diaries, Adams reveals a constant struggle against his own autocratic tendencies. He recognized in himself the temptation of absolute power, the seduction of unquestionable certainty. "I am naturally a tyrant," he confessed in a letter to Jefferson, "but I strive to be a benevolent tyrant." This brutal honesty with himself was his primary tool of self-governance. In the modern world, where social media has transformed every individual into their own editor, where algorithms feed us only information that confirms our beliefs, where political polarization has turned dissent into heresy, Adams offers us a crucial moral compass. He would warn us about the dangers of surrendering our critical thinking power to a single source of authority, be it a political party, a digital influencer, a spiritual guru, or even a recommendation algorithm. The personal federalism Adams practiced meant distributing his attention, trust, and loyalty among multiple sources of wisdom and guidance. Adams also understood that balance does not mean paralyzing neutrality. Neutrality is often a mask for cowardice, he observed. True balance requires taking firm stands based on solid principles while remaining open to correction when presented with superior evidence. Contemporary practical application. Practice digital federalism. Do not allow a single platform or source to dominate your informational diet. Institute checks and balances in your important decisions. Consult people who think differently from you before making significant choices. Develop multiple healthy identities: professional, familial, communal, creative. Do not put all your self-esteem eggs in one basket. Establish limited mandates for your own convictions. Revisit and re-evaluate your fundamental beliefs periodically. Cultivate the art of loyal opposition. Critically examine organizations and people you love. Maintain a personal cabinet of diverse advisors who can challenge your blind spots. As Adams wisely noted, power without responsibility is tyranny, whether exercised by kings or by us over ourselves. Third lesson: virtue in public service. Public service is my only aim, my only ambition, declared Adams in 1774, fully aware that politics brought him more pain than glory, more enemies than friends, and more sacrifices than rewards. At 39, he could have remained a prosperous lawyer in Boston, securing comfort and safety for his family. Instead, he chose the path of public service, a choice that would separate him from Abigail for years, put his life at risk, and tarnish his reputation. Why? Adams had an almost mystical understanding of what he called Republican virtue, the idea that a free society can only exist when its most capable citizens are willing to sacrifice personal interests for the common good. It wasn't naive altruism, it was enlightened pragmatism. Adams knew that nations die when their best talents retreat into private life, leaving power to the corrupt and ambitious. His presidency exemplifies this philosophy. Elected in 1796, Adams inherited a nation on the brink of civil war, with Federalists and Republicans hating each other with religious intensity. France and England were pressuring the United States to choose sides in their wars. His own party demanded war against France. His opponents wanted war against England. Adams chose peace. Against his party, against public opinion, against his advisors, he negotiated with France and avoided a war that could have destroyed the young republic. The decision cost him re-election and political isolation but saved the country. I wish it to be inscribed on my tomb. Here lies John Adams, who assumed responsibility for peace with France in the year 1800, he said years later. In our era of politics as entertainment, where leadership is often confused with charisma and success is measured by likes and trending topics, Adams offers us a radically different definition of authentic leadership. For him, leading meant doing what is right even when it is unpopular, especially when it is unpopular. But Adams did not limit public service to government. He saw every profession, every relationship, every opportunity for influence as a chance to serve the common good. As a lawyer, he defended unpopular causes by principle. As a father, he educated his children to be responsible citizens. As a neighbor, he actively engaged in community life. Reputation should be the consequence, not the aim of action, Adams wrote. This distinction is crucial. He was not indifferent to recognition. His diaries reveal a man deeply concerned about his historical reputation, but he refused to let that concern dictate his ethical decisions. Contemporary practical application. In the professional context, make decisions based on what is best for the organization and its stakeholders, not just for your personal career. In family life, be the responsible adult, even when it means being temporarily unpopular with children or spouse. In the community, engage in local causes, even if they do not bring personal recognition. Online, use your digital influence, however minimal, to elevate public discourse, not just to gain followers. In consumption, consider the social and environmental impact of your economic choices. In leadership, develop the courage to communicate difficult truths when in positions of authority. In everyday life, practice small acts of public service, from returning lost wallets to correcting false information in discussions. Adams teaches us that the true test of virtue is not in the grand historical decisions, but in the small daily choices between self-interest and the common good. As he said, virtue is not hereditary. It must be earned every generation, by every individual, through every decision. Fourth lesson: marriage as intellectual partnership. Among the more than 1,000 letters exchanged between John and Abigail Adams over 54 years of marriage, we find not only one of the most touching love stories in American history, but a revolutionary model of marital partnership that anticipated by centuries our modern understanding of healthy relationships. "You are my dearest friend," John wrote to Abigail in 1776 during the Continental Congress. This word, friend, carried extraordinary weight at a time when wives were considered their husband's legal property. For Adams, Abigail was not just a romantic companion or domestic manager. She was his political advisor, intellectual critic, and partner in all the major decisions of his life. Their letters reveal passionate debates about political philosophy, military strategy, child-rearing, and the moral issues of their time. When Abigail wrote her famous exhortation, "Remember the ladies," during the drafting of the laws for the new nation, she was not making a timid request. She was articulating a sophisticated political philosophy about natural rights and democratic representation. John did not just listen. He was transformed by these conversations. Many of Adams' most progressive political positions, including his early opposition to slavery and skepticism about direct democracy, were deeply influenced by Abigail's insights. He had the intellectual humility to recognize that his wife was, in many respects, politically sharper than he was. But the Adams relationship went beyond politics. They shared a voracious curiosity about the world, a passion for reading, and a deep belief in mutual growth. When separated by the demands of public service, Adams spent years in Europe as a diplomat. They maintained their intimacy through letters that were true lessons in philosophy, reports on agriculture, debates about education, and deeply personal confessions. "Friendship is one of the distinctions between us and the brutes," John wrote. He understood that a marriage without genuine friendship was merely an empty social convention. Friendship requires equality, mutual respect, and shared growth, qualities rarely associated with marriage in the 18th century. In our time, where dating apps reduce relationships to superficial traits, where digital communication often substitutes for real intimacy, where many marriages wither due to a lack of shared intellectual growth, the Adams model offers a profoundly attractive and challenging alternative. They show us that lasting relationships are not based solely on emotional compatibility or physical attraction, but on the capacity to be eternal students of each other. John Adams grew as a person, politician, and thinker because he was married to someone who constantly challenged his ideas and expanded his horizons. Contemporary practical application. Choose partners who challenge your intellect, not just those who confirm your opinions. Establish regular rituals for deep conversation, weekly discussions on books, ideas, dreams, and ethical dilemmas. Practice marital curiosity. Remain genuinely interested in your partner's growth and changes. Develop shared intellectual projects. Study a new subject together, write a joint blog, plan educational trips. Cultivate the art of respectfully disagreeing. Debate important issues without attacking personal character. Maintain strong individual identities. Have your own interests that enrich the relationship. Practice intellectual transparency. Share doubts, fears, and insights without fear of judgment. Create traditions of mutual growth. Take classes together, join reading clubs for two, have regular discussions about life goals. As Abigail wrote to John, "A great learning incapacitates more men for deep thinking than it empowers." The Adamses teach us that true knowledge is that which we share and that transforms us together. Marriage, in its highest vision, is a university for two people where both are eternally teacher and student. Fifth lesson: preparation for adversity. John Adams lived his entire life preparing for storms he expected but never knew when they would arrive. He faced fierce criticism questioning his patriotic loyalty, political isolation that left him without party or allies, personal attacks that ridiculed his appearance and temperament, and even the real possibility of execution for treason during the American Revolution. His response to each crisis revealed a deeply stoic philosophy, tempered by Yankee pragmatism, meticulous preparation for the controllable, serene acceptance of the uncontrollable. "Worry is interest paid on problems before they come," he observed, anticipating cognitive psychology centuries ahead of its time. From a young age, Adams cultivated what he called inner fortitude. He obsessively studied, not for academic pleasure, but as preparation for future challenges. He kept detailed journals where he analyzed his mistakes, identified patterns of behavior, and developed strategies for self-improvement. He practiced oratory alone in open fields, preparing for debates he had not yet been called to wage. When the Stamp Act crisis of 1765 turned Boston into a political powder keg, Adams had already spent years studying British constitutional law. When sent to Europe as a diplomat during the Revolutionary War, he already mastered French and had studied European politics. When he became president, he had closely observed the mistakes of Washington and Hamilton. But Adams' preparation went beyond technical competence. He understood that adversity tests not only our skills but our character. Adversity reveals genius, prosperity hides it, he wrote. This is why he deliberately developed what we would today call psychological resilience. One technique Adams practiced was pre-mortem, imagining failure scenarios before they occurred and mentally rehearsing his responses. In his diaries, we find exercises where he visualizes his own death, the collapse of his political career, or the financial ruin of his family. Not out of masochism, but for emotional preparation. Hope is a theological virtue, not a political strategy, he once wrote. Adams carefully distinguished between naive optimism and grounded hope. He hoped for the best but prepared for the worst, an approach that allowed him to navigate crises that destroyed less prepared men. In our world of rapid changes, economic instability, global pandemics, climate crises, and technological uncertainties, Adams' philosophy on preparation for adversity assumes almost prophetic relevance. We live in a time where the only constant is change, where black swans seem to appear with increasing frequency. Adams would teach us that adversity is not an aberration, it is the normal condition of human existence. Prosperity, stability, and predictability are temporary interludes in lives fundamentally uncertain. The secret is not to avoid adversity, impossible, but to develop adaptive response capacity. Contemporary practical application. Develop financial anti-fragility, maintain emergency reserves, diversify income sources, live below your means. Cultivate multiple skills. Do not rely on a single skill or industry for your economic security. Practice adversity exercises. Periodically impose voluntary challenges on yourself, fasting, intense exercise, controlled discomfort, to strengthen your resilience. Build robust support networks. Maintain deep relationships that can survive crises. Develop contemplative disciplines, meditation, prayer, philosophical reflection, practices that strengthen inner equanimity. Stay physically strong. Adams obsessively walked and worked on his farm. He knew that physical resilience supports mental resilience. Regularly practice pre-mortem. Identify vulnerabilities in your plans and develop contingency strategies. Study history. Understand how others faced crises similar to your own. Cultivate a transcendent purpose. Connect with causes greater than your personal convenience. As Adams prophetically observed, difficulty is the excuse of history, impossibility is the excuse of fools. The difference between history and excuse often rests not in the size of the obstacles we face, but in the quality of our preparation to confront them. Sixth lesson: legacy beyond personal success. Adams knew he would not be the most remembered or the most loved president. But he understood something deeper. True success is measured by the legacy we leave for future generations. In a culture obsessed with immediate metrics, likes, views, quarterly profits, Adams invites us to think in terms of decades, not moments. What world are we building for our children? Practical application. Make decisions thinking about their long-term consequences. Invest in causes that transcend your own existence. Teach, mentor, contribute to the common good. True success is measured by the positive impact we leave in the world. Conclusion: inspirational tone and call to action. John Adams died on July 4, 1826, exactly 50 years after the Declaration of Independence, his last words being, "Thomas Jefferson still lives," without knowing that Jefferson had died hours earlier. Until the end, Adams was thinking of his country, his contemporaries, and the shared legacy. The lessons of Adams are not just pages of history, they are a manual for living in turbulent times. They remind us that, regardless of the era, the fundamental challenges of the human condition remain. how to live with integrity, how to serve the common good, how to build something lasting in a transient world. In Adams' own words, remember, democracy never lasts long. Soon it wastes, exhausts, and murders itself. There has never been a democracy that did not commit suicide. This is not pessimism. It is a call to eternal vigilance and constant engagement. The legacy of John Adams lives each time we choose education over ignorance, service over self-interest, courage over convenience. It lives each time we build bridges instead of walls, each time we think of future generations instead of just the next quarter. In a rapidly changing world, Adams' principles remain as beacons, illuminating the way not just to personal success but to a more just, wiser, and enduring society. The question John Adams leaves us is simple yet profound. What kind of ancestor will you be? What lessons will your life teach future generations? The time to start building that legacy is now. As Adams would say, yesterday was the last day of the past, today is the first day of the future.